Well, Pulso fam, we've reached the final episode of this season of Confianza, where we've spent 6 episodes exploring different facets of grief. 1 in 4 women have miscarriages, yet it's still such a taboo topic to discuss and such an awkward type of grief to process and go through. That's why we want to talk about it here in Confianza. It would be the epitome of hypocrisy to invite our team, our crew of content creators, our allies and friends to get vulnerable here on the pod and not do so myself. So for our 7th and final episode, I'm diving into my own grief of losing a pregnancy at the end of last year. This episode, as you've guessed, is going to go into details of my pregnancy journey and that of my friends. So for those listening who are struggling with fertility issues or who are pregnant, we recommend that if you choose to listen to this episode, please make sure to protect your emotional and mental health. I'm Liz Rebecca, and today I'm in conversation with my friend Ana Cristina Perez as we share the layered grief that we felt as we went through miscarriages last year. This is In Confianza. Ana Cristina, welcome to In Confianza.
Thank you very much.
The first question that we ask all of our guests is, what is the last thing you told someone in Confianza?
Wow, the last thing I told somebody in Confianza. I would say that would have to be in regards to my yoga career, that in Confianza I feel I put aside and I really miss, even though now I'm dedicating my time to something else. So lately I've been somebody came up with, when are you going to come back and do some yoga classes? And I'm like, I don't know when, but I would really love to. So that was something that came up that I told somebody in Confianza that I haven't yet come around to actually make it a reality. So that's something that came up not so long ago.
So you confessed something that you actually really want and gave yourself permission to actually say it out loud.
Yes. So who knows when that's going to happen, but I hope it's sooner than later.
I hope so for you too. Bueno, entrando en materia, Ana Cristina, we're here because we have a shared grief that we are going to compartir precisamente here in Confianza. And as we start to unpack all of the feelings of losing a pregnancy and what that meant for us, I want to ask you, when did you know that you were feeling better?
Well, this year I've been feeling better. Last year, I know I wasn't. And I think I have a thing with dates. And my date, my grieving date, it's the 24th. So January 24th, I remember it passed by like any other date. And that was oh, I'm feeling better. Now the 24th don't hit as hard as before.
Right.
So I guess that day I was like, okay. I've integrated this grief into my life, and now the 24th is just another day. Yeah. So not so long ago, I started feeling better.
That's so interesting. My word of the year is actually integrate. So I love that we're bringing that word to this space. And yeah, it's kind of like when the feeling is still there, but it's maybe not the first thing that comes to mind when you look at that date on the calendar. Yeah. I know that for me, it was when I could say I had a miscarriage out loud without immediately starting to cry. And I was like, oh, wow, I can actually say this and feel it and feel the emotion behind it and actually get the sentence out without crying. I remember telling you this when we were on the phone, and I was like, still con la voz quebrantada. And I was like, okay, I can say this. I can talk about this. We're entering a different phase now of integrating this into our life, like you said.
Yes.
When we were talking, catching up before this conversation, I found it so interesting that the more we talked and shared our experience, the more we found that there were so many layers of grief and so many types of grief in this one, if we can call it the grief of loss of a pregnancy as we've been talking about. So I wanted to go through those with you, Ana Cristina, because I think it is so layered, and it is a unique feeling to losing a life before you know the life outside of the womb, or before their earth side, as we say. So I wanted to talk to you about that because I think that is such a powerful framework to guide our conversation. And I think the first one that I want to touch on with you is the grief of la ilusión, as we talked about, of that hope, of that excitement, the grief of the life with this new person being part of your family that is now an imagination and a picture of what your future was going to be like that's no longer there.
Yes, that first grief hits hard because the pregnancy world, it's all like pink and fluffy and butterflies and full of excitement and illusion of what's coming, of that hope of what's going to happen at the end of these 9-10 months. But then when it's not, you're left like in the middle of a story, like, wait, what? This is not part of the story. This is not what a pregnancy looks like in my mind, no? Like in this fairy tale pregnancy world, which is what we usually see, on the social media, on what people share. It's a pretty part of it. But when it happens to you, it's like, whoa, there's this dark part of pregnancy that barely anyone talks about it or shares out loud. So that illusion, it doesn't seem as common as afterwards you end up finding out that is sadly very common. And that illusion, like that loss of that illusion hits hard because it's like, it was this imaginary idea that was, in my case, beating inside of me, but it wasn't physically, I wasn't holding it. So it's like, it's real, but it's not tangible outside, right? So that part hit hard, and especially in my case, which I've been learning throughout my years and all that self-awareness about, being flexible, allowing plans to change and so forth. But if there was a lesson in my life about changing plans, this was it. Like I was having a hard time in life with, when plan changes and wanting to control outcomes and so on. And when this happened, it's like, okay, I think I got it. No more like big, huge lessons. I'm not, plans changing. Like I got the lesson. Like I don't want any more, huge things like that to happen. Because to me it was that grief of illusion came hand to hand with learning that life is right now and you have no idea when it's not going to be. So that was a huge lesson for me and like a very hard one to learn.
I am a planner like you, so to say that I can relate is an understatement, Ana Cristina. Obviously, I feel so much for what you're saying, and I too made so many plans. I was already making plans for trips, and not just planning the events, but we told our daughter that she was going to be a big sister, and we were already planning to, decorate in a different way, include the new baby into our home, already talking logistics of what our life was going to look like. Just already in our minds, starting to rearrange everything based on this plan from 9 months after we found out, and our life had already changed, right? So to be planning based on a hope and an excitement of a future life that you're so excited to bring Earthside, and then to find out that those plans changed, but in a different way than when other plans change, right? Of course, this is enormous. This is not just any plan. This is literally family that you're trying to build, right? So it's just, and like you said, this is common. Miscarriages are common, or more common than we think, and people don't often talk about it. But because of this pregnancy, mom, beautiful world, you kind of plug in. No sé si te pasó a ti, but you automatically plug in, and you're in the mode, and you're so excited, and you're hormonal, and you're just so tender, and you're bringing life into the new world. And so it was like almost instant for me that I came into that sphere again, and you're like, ya va, o sea, we don't know. This is a delicate process. It's a miracle. And I don't know. I think as we're talking about this, I also have an illusion, a grief of my own naivete. Like, I feel like I lost a bit of, inocencia, maybe, that assumption that everything is going to be fine, because why wouldn't it be fine?
Yeah.
That's, I think, another layer to this grief of lo que no fue. I don't know if you feel the same.
Definitely the same, because I tend to be very naive in life, because I don't know, I like to, optimism and things going well, like I vibrate there. So I sometimes take it for granted that sometimes things don't go as, they could. It's one of these things that you think happens to other people and not people near you, apparently didn't happen to them. But then you start finding out later that it's like, oh no, yeah, it did happen to her and to her and to her. I'm like, wait, why I didn't know about this.
And that's your perfect segue here, Ana Cristina, to the second grief in the 4 layers of grief that we're going to talk about. The grief of experiencing this alone. Like, it wasn't until after you and I talked and I saw you so vulnerably and so beautifully share your experience publicly on social media, and then to talk to other friends that it had happened to, and to family members that were like, oh, it's happened to me 3 and 4 times. And I was like, why wasn't I there for you? Why didn't I know? Why do I feel so alone? Why are we so alone in this grief? It's also, we're going to touch on the silent part of this as well. But I think part of it is that we don't share it, but also part of it, Ana Cristina, is that it actually is just happening to you. So I think there is both things, right? We don't share this as often. And then at the same time, you're the person carrying the new life. Yes, of course, your partner, hopefully, if you're as fortunate as we are to have partners with us that are living this experience together, but it's actually physically only happening to you. And I think this is something that, because you can't usually see it in most cases, in my case, I was early along, you could not tell that I was pregnant. And so when I found out that I was having a miscarriage, it's like, well, I'm still the same. I was still working. I was still probably in the busiest time of my work time last year. I was still waking up. I was still in my case taking care of my daughter and of everything in the house, while this deep grief that no one else has a relationship with, this life being formed, except again, maybe your partner, but even still, no es lo mismo. So it's like, you don't share it, but you also, it's this feeling of no one understands me, because literally no one else even has a connection with this being to feel what I feel.
Yes, it is definitely a very lonely process, because everything that I was feeling, I was feeling it. And even though I tried to my close surrounding, tried to explain, it was like, it's not like they couldn't understand me, but it's like I felt that I was going through it alone. And well, not alone, because my husband was very, very close to me, and I did get a very important support. I searched for support during the process, but at the beginning, it was like a desperation of that kind of like not being able to do something about it. It was like, and that still affects me, but it's because I did everything that I could, and it wasn't up to me for it to not happen. And when it happened, it was like, because I don't know if it was your experience, but in my experience, I started getting like postpartum, hormones and things. Like, I started losing my hair, and I felt like still super tired, and like all these things that didn't make sense with the fact that there was not life in my hands. It was just gone. But I still had all the effects of a postpartum. So that part felt very weird, because at the same time, I decided that instead of taking like a break from work, I decided to keep on going to work because it helped me not stay like in bed and feeling sad or, I didn't want to be in an environment, like, even though I love my house and it's a safe place, I didn't want to be more alone in the process. Yeah. So I prefer to, go back to my routine and do my stuff. So I didn't feel like so alone. So that part of going back to work, but at the same time having the hormones and the feelings of a postparto, it was so weird because it wasn't coherent. It wasn't like, with all this thing, like I should have taken a break, but at the same time I didn't want to be alone.
More alone than you were already feeling, right? More alone.
Yes, it's a lonely process. And one of the first things I did was try to connect with people before I started sharing. This is before I started sharing, and then I can explain why I started sharing. But before I started sharing about it, I tried to connect with people. I didn't know people in my life that had gone through a miscarriage. And so I looked online, blogs and stuff, and I found a book that I really liked. I mean, that it seemed that I was going to really like because it was about, a regular woman. It wasn't like a doctor or a psychologist or somebody with a professional expertise on the topic. It was just a regular woman that had several miscarriages, and she was just telling her story of not expecting or unexpecting a pregnancy. And that helped a lot to me, reading this book, not to feel so alone, because even though I started hearing of people, de boca a boca, oh, fulanita had a miscarriage too, and menganita also had a miscarriage, but they weren't close to me, and they weren't going through it at the moment that I was going through. It was something that had already happened, and maybe they already had 2 or 3 kids after that, and they were in another stage that I wasn't. It was hopeful, but at that moment I wanted to connect with somebody who was maybe grieving like I was grieving, and so a book helped a lot. And therapy, obviously therapy. I do therapy regularly twice a month, like it's my brain gym or my gym for the brain. And then I found another psychologist, a specialist on the topic, whom I had a continuous therapy. Like she was therapy on demand kind of thing. Like if I was feeling down, I could write or call and she would answer. And that was huge help in the process of not feeling alone before I started sharing. Because when I started sharing, then I started to connect with other women, and that helped a lot.
You're taking me to the third type of grief, Ana Cristina. Thank you for teeing up all of my transitions sin planificarlo.
Sin planificarlo.
Which is the grief of this being something that's so silent. It's usually a silent grief. And I think that what you're sharing is like, I started sharing once I was ready to share is so much part of it, right? I think with other types of grief, because they are public, right? Think of, if we're thinking of losing someone you love, usually you are connected to other people who also love that person. And so you are publicly or grieving in community in a different way. And I want to talk more about what inspired you to share your story and how did this idea of silent grieving feel for you as you've been transitándolo todo?
Well, let's say that at the beginning it was very well, it still is very surprising to me that this type of pregnancy loss grief is tan doloroso como silencioso. Like that was one of the things that really like hit hard to me.
As painful as it is silent for those English speakers listening.
Yes. And at the beginning, it was like as if I had to care for the emotions of others, care for others' illusion on my pregnancy, like how it was going to affect them knowing that there was no pregnancy anymore, like how I was going to tell them. I'm like, I was more worried about how I was they're going to take them, that what I was going through. So like at the beginning, that really like bothered me. Like I'm worried about them, but then in the process, I'm keeping this silent because I don't know how to say something that it's also sadly natural to some women. And in this case, me. And so at the beginning, I didn't know how to share it or like what would happen when I shared it, because I didn't want to be going through a grieving process and also having to care for the emotions of others. It's a hard grief that goes hand in hand with choosing to go through it alone, because you feel like nobody understands you and you feel like you just want to be, you know, people to hold space for you and your emotions and validate them, not like, you know, pass them by like, oh, good for you. You can get pregnant. So that's good news. So you try again. And
at least you're fertile.
Yes. I've heard that one too.
Say that to me.
Yes, to me too. And what I've come to realize is that we have not been taught as a society of how to hold space for another's emotions that are not happy or positive or good. I don't want to validate, give them the
qualifier
good or
of
bad.
good or bad.
No, but yeah, qualify them as good or bad, but as these more comfortable emotions versus uncomfortable emotions, because sadness and grieving and hopelessness are not comfortable. They're very uncomfortable emotions. So I feel people don't want to feel uncomfortable. So that's why they do not connect with your sadness, because they don't want to feel sad. They don't want to be there. So they come up from hope and optimism, and you're gonna try again, and it's gonna happen next time because it's more comfortable. That's my appreciation. And Liz, I wanna let you know that I hear you, I feel you, I've been there. I know how hard it has been to get all that spectrum of responses, which are very uncomfortable to receive, and I know are very uncomfortable to give. And that's why I think people don't know how to give them, don't know how to support somebody going through a pregnancy loss of somebody that nobody has met, nobody has known, nobody has a connection with, just you. And it's mind-boggling, but I think that's the part where talking about it helps them connect with those emotions and know that it's okay to just hold space, to just, I'm here for you. I'm here for you and all of your emotions. Or maybe that person cannot be there for you because it triggers, stuff, but just talking about it. Like, I'm sorry, I cannot be there for you right now because it triggers things in me, but I hope in the true, of my heart that you're going to find your support. You're going to find it, you're going to look at the sky and connect with your baby or whatever. And it's about helping to teach our society of how to communicate loss, how to feel comfortable with loss, because it's part of life. Loss is part of life. And that's, yes.
So I love that you've been following your heart, and as you have done this entire conversation, it leads me perfectly to the fourth type of grief that we touched on when we first talked, which is as we're living this experience, as you're grieving la ilusión que no fue, as you're processing the silent, lonely, vocal, vulnerable, and what level of that you want to have. Add on to that the layer that we actually don't have systems in place to help us tactically, emotionally, very practically, or even spiritually live this type of loss. And so as I'm thinking of the altar that I made porque me provocó and was my way of having ritual and ceremony, as I'm thinking of all of the things that you've done on your own, to give her presence and her existing in your life the space she deserves, it took a lot probably for you to figure that out, because there wasn't a manual, un acompañamiento, and it's just, again, seen as something pasajero, short-term, ephemeral, that you kind of move on from and try again the next time if that is in the cards for you. And I think that I guess systemic grief, if we want to call it that, it obviously doesn't help everything else that you're living.
No.
I remember in my
doesn't.
case, in my case, with my miscarriage, it was lengthy to live and process and understand, and for us to go through. And I remember that when I would go to the doctor, everyone was rushing me to make medical decisions that I wasn't ready for, that I didn't understand, that also didn't always go in line with the natural, more holistic way that I also like to live my own processes and to grieve and to understand and to do my own research and to compare. And so I remember every time I had to go to the doctor, which again, in my case was too many times to count, it was always a pressure and a rush and a very technical response from the medical team that I was hoping would, one, have a bit more empathy, two, be a bit more human, and three, also, I guess, respect my process a bit more within the confines of medical safety, of course, but it was just very matter of fact. Okay, boom, beam, bang. Here's the options. What do you want to do? And I was like, this is so heart-wrenching. And I have not ever experienced or learned what even all of this means. Dame un momento. And so, I think that part as well was very difficult in my case to navigate, to not be in a system that maybe gives us the soulfulness and the humanity. How ironic, right? The most human experience of all felt so inhumane.
Yes, that part was also very hard, because I feel that the medical system is prepared to help you through giving birth to life, but it's not prepared for you to give birth to loss, because we're not prepared for that. We're not, and the system is so not prepared for it, that there's no protocols of how to guide people through loss of a baby. That I'm talking about my experience, a baby that was not born. Maybe if it was someone that was alive and then, dies, it's a different process. There is a process for that.
Right.
But for a life that was not born, the process is different. And one of the hardest part for me was that when it happened, when the loss happened, I felt that it was as if my baby all of a sudden became a biological matter. It wasn't a baby anymore. And that part was, I think, the saddest part of my whole process, because I wasn't able to give like a proper physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally closure. It was like, she was there and then she wasn't. And I wasn't able to do something with her. Like she was just gone. And that, it's like, hello, it's anybody, like anyone could help me. Like I had a relationship with my baby. She was inside me and then she was just taken and then gone. And that part really hit hard, because I felt like I was taking the right of having that ceremony, of having that closure, and having like a path. Somebody, please, like somebody has walked this path. Somebody can tell me my options. Like, do I have options? And apparently I didn't. And that part was like, the system is not prepared for pregnancy loss. Like, how do you guide somebody through this, considering the needs or the desires of the emotions of the mother, the father, the family. And that was very, very, very hard, because even though I had found even though in my medical case, I had help through the figuring it out process, when the loss came, it was like, there's no path here. The path ends here. I'm like, no, I don't want that path. I want like a clear path, like a path where I could, do like a closure like everybody else when there's a living person that dies.
Right.
And that was very hard because I felt like, okay, so if my baby's not born, then it's like it didn't exist.
Or she doesn't matter, right? Because because medically, there are so many different terms for every different process of the pregnancy to birth journey, but there aren't perhaps the same terms or frameworks for pregnancy to loss, which again, statistically, you would expect that there would be more support, given that 20% of women who get pregnant may experience a miscarriage. And yet there's so little, Ana Cristina, to help you through that. O sea, qué difícil.
That was very hard. So hard. Like, I couldn't believe, like, I didn't have options. I'm like, there's no option. Like, nobody has ever thought of creating options for us. Like, where do I start creating these? Like, because it's like hard. And then you're left alone, feeling like, why would somebody want to make this spiritual closure of a baby that wasn't born, but it's not big enough for it to be considered a baby. And it's like, what happens to us? Like, to the, like in the limbo, like we're like limbo, pregnancy loss limbo, we can call it. I don't know, because it's like, okay, so you're just, okay, it happened. So bye, try again next time. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? That was hard. That was the hardest part.
Te abrazo, Ana Cristina, te abrazo, because it, again, doesn't help everything that you're already personally going through. And my hope is that this conversation and all of the conversations that we have to bring visibility to how we feel through and with and alongside this process can hopefully bring change, because it would make this experience less hard. Definitely not easier, but less hard if the systems, especially the medical system, but the workplace,
family,
public spaces, family, right? Let's figure this out, people. Let's figure this out together, because too many of us are living through this alone, silently, and without the support that we all deserve, and that every woman deserves, regardless of the outcome of their pregnancy.
Definitely. And before we end, I would like to share an anécdota that came up as you were saying that, that summary just then. It was one of the days that I was going to work. I get into the elevator and I was feeling lonely. I was feeling silent. I was feeling like as is the medical system me había decepcionado, like they weren't there for me. And I remember being at the elevator and like other women walk into the elevator and I, press the button to go to my floor. And while we were going up, I'm like, this is happening to me, right? But I have no idea of how many of these other women in this elevator with me are going through the same thing. Like, we're there with our, we're ready to go to work phase, and maybe all of them have gone through a miscarriage. Maybe all of them are going through it. Maybe some of them are pregnant and having doubts of, if their baby is okay or not okay. And I'm like, and we're there and we keep going with our lives and we don't talk about it. And there's not a system that helps us through it. Like an easy access system. Because if you look for it, yes, you can find the book, you can find the therapist, you can find the support group, but it's not common. It's not easy to get to. It's not just, you have to figure it out. It's not clear. So that moment in that elevator really marked a moment for me to, maybe if I start sharing, after I share that, work stuff, maybe start sharing more, start sharing how I feel in one post here, another post there. Maybe slowly but surely other people start talking about it too. So that moment marked a lot for me, and hopefully the little and little that we do in this conversation maybe sparks other people to start talking about it, start sharing, start being vulnerable, start learning how to hold space for one another, and how to, transitar uncomfortable emotions, how to just walk, just go with it, and try to save others in the process. It's just like be there for others, and how each one of us, from where we're expertise, from where we work, from what we do, start becoming more human in our interactions with other people through loss. It's hard. It's already hard enough for it to, add that layer of, awkwardness or weirdness or uncomfortableness. So as soon as we connect with our human inside and just share from what we feel, yes, I feel uncomfortable sharing this. Yes, I feel uncomfortable through loss. Yes, I feel uncomfortable holding space and sadness. And it's okay. And it's okay. Just communicating it. It's just like the first step to start changing this taboo of a topic that it's sadly, more common than we know.
There's no better way to end, Ana Cristina. Gracias por compartir, for being in confianza with me, and I'm so grateful that I have you as someone to count on and with through this process. And I know this conversation will at least help one person feel less alone. Y si logramos eso, it's a start to all of the rest of the goals of this no longer silent grief, like you mentioned.
Yes.
From here forward. I want to say one final phrase que tú me dijiste when we talked, which is you grow through what you go through. And so
yes,
I'm sure there is much growth for both of us in this process.
Yes, there is, for sure. And I'm glad we're growing together through it.
Gracias, mi dur.